All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are stepping into a narrative today that honestly feels like a dark, graphic novel-style mythological epic. It's called the Eternal Theater of Active Negation. Now, I want you to picture a stage in your mind, but definitely not a typical one. We're talking about a chilling, cosmic theater that tackles the cyclical nature of human vanity, our obsession with legacy, and ultimate metaphysical destruction. It's a really profound story because it completely flips human existence on its head. Instead of that familiar, comforting path toward redemption we usually hear about, this is about an endless cycle of hollowing out meaning. So, settle in, because the curtain is about to rise on a truly wild performance.
To really get what's happening here, we have to feel the atmosphere of the text itself. Quote, "Upon the pulpit of the perished stars, where the air is thick with the scent of frozen iron." Man, that isn't just setting a scene, it's a sensory warning. You can almost feel that metaphysical chill, right? The story builds this stage using visceral, absolutely freezing imagery. Frozen iron, an obsidian mist, a great noon that casts literally zero shadows. It hooks us immediately because it takes the warm, desperate striving of humanity and drops it directly onto a stage that is infinitely cold and just completely indifferent.
So, let's set the scene. Act 1, the ego's hubris at the great noon.
This entire story functions as a brutal 5-act critique of human pride and all those legacies we try so hard to build. We're introduced to a setting where humanity is at the absolute peak of its pride. We are trying to serve up our greatest achievements to a universe that, well, simply isn't hungry. Consider this massive sensory contrast. On one side, you have the roast beast. It's this brilliant metaphor for humanity's warm feast of constructed meanings. Our empires, our philosophies, our art. The text actually calls these things brightly colored scarves of vanity that we wrap around ourselves to keep warm. And on the other side, the empty void, a universe with absolutely no heartbeat, reeking of frozen iron. It just perfectly captures that desperate warmth of the human ego trying to comfort itself against the absolute freezing reality of the cosmos.
The main performer carrying this feast is known as the Seeker of the Valley. And the Seeker basically represents all of us, humanity, arriving at the great noon, which is supposed to be the absolute peak of our existence. The Seeker is lugging around this massive symbolic feast, genuinely believing that their life, their legacy, their empire, that it all forms an impenetrable fortress. But the reality, they're just a performer on a stage, using this giant feast to hide from the yawning abyss of existence. They think they're up there dining with the gods, but, spoiler alert, the gods aren't there.
Moving right along to Act 2, the ego's indifference and the great fast.
So the Seeker gets to the mountain, but they don't find gods. Instead, they stumble into a cosmic wager. It's kind of like the classic prologue in heaven you'd see in Goethe's Faust, but without a shred of redemption. Waiting for the Seeker is the Red Spectre. Think of the Spectre as an indifferent Mephistopheles. Now, your traditional Mephistopheles tempts you, right? Offers you worldly pleasures or forbidden knowledge for your soul. Not the Red Spectre. He offers absolutely nothing. He's just a pillar of crimson indifference. He initiates what's called the Great Fast, which is a terminal wager designed to completely strip away human meaning, just to prove exactly how fragile it is. And it happens in a flash. The Spectre simply touches the Seeker's roast beast, and instantly the entire feast turns into matter that tastes of nothing. All the meaning is just drained right out of it. It prompts this utterly desperate realization from the Seeker, who cries out, "My feast is my life!" But the Spectre just replies with silence. A silence so profound that the text says the Seeker feels his anchor hit no bottom. It's a terrifying, visceral moment. That fortress they built, a total illusion. The void is literally all there is. Which brings us to Act 3, the ego's descent into the void. So the Seeker's illusions are gone, but the stage doesn't just go empty. Instead, these terrifying architects of the void step out from the obsidian mist to finish the job. And what's wild is how methodical, how systematic this destruction is. It's a 3-step on creating. First, as we saw, the Red Spectre initiates the Great Fast to strip away the meaning. Step 2, an entity known as the Grim Nash steps up and utters the honest sound to completely shatter whatever delusion is left. And finally, step 3, the Shadow Reaper arrives to apply the logic of zero, meticulously harvesting the leftover husks. These cosmic entities, they aren't evil or malicious. They're essentially just ushers, methodically clearing a stage for a performance that is already over. Let's actually zoom in on step 2 for a second, the honest sound. The text describes it as a heavy thud delivered by the Grim Nash.
It's not just a noise, okay? It's a literal tactical tool of nihilism. This sound swallows light. It vibrates right through the seeker's teeth, pulling their spirit straight into the dirt and burning away what the text calls the mask of the herd. It takes a lifetime of achievements and reduces it to a child's game played in a graveyard. And once the Nash hollows everything out, the Shadow Reaper turns that shattered pride into a pool of gore, which, incredibly, the lore refers to as the ink of the finished story. And the story somehow gets even darker in Act 4, the dissolution of the ego in the lunar mirror. Right when you think the Seeker is going to get this grand, dramatic, Shakespearean death speech, we hit the absolute peak of cosmic absurdity. The Seeker is gearing up for their tragic monologue, and suddenly, a high, piercing sound cuts through the air. It's the Silver Imp, laughing. And the Imp delivers this absolute gut punch of a line. You thought this was a tragedy, but a tragedy requires an audience. This, dear Usher, is simply maintenance. Ouch. It completely robs the Seeker of even the basic dignity of a tragic ending. The Imp is acting as this literal and metaphorical lunar mirror here. That laughing sound, it's compared to breaking glass, shattering the illusions of literally everyone on stage, not just the Seeker. The Imp reveals that the Red Spectre, the Grim Nash, the Reaper, none of them are grand cosmic masters. No way. They're all just performers making scripted gestures in a completely empty house. There is no audience, zero gods watching. And this realization is so incredibly heavy that it causes the Red Spectre's own ego to crack. His entire existential purpose is suddenly exposed as nothing more than a hollow script. Which brings us to the finale. Act 5, Apotheosis and the Eternal Return. So the Red Spectre's ego cracks, but that actually isn't the end of him. It's the catalyst for a massive, terrifying transformation. Look at how incredibly fast this apotheosis happens. At exactly 0 seconds, the Spectre's individual identity and ego just dissolve completely into the void. Then, in just 1 minute, he undergoes apotheosis. He grows in stature, his robes harden into literal plate armor, and he becomes the Crimson Knight, the superego of eternal negation. At 1 hour, the knight stands there in absolute silence while the Silver Imp carves lunar runes into the obsidian floor, resetting the stage. And finally, at 1 eon, the cycle of the eternal return starts all over again. Unlike a standard redemptive ending that brings peace, the Crimson Knight just waits for the next seeker. He ensures the nightmare absolutely refuses to stay dead. So, after walking through this incredible theatrical myth, we really have to pause and ask ourselves, why? Why clear a cosmic stage for an audience that doesn't even exist? Why go through this elaborate process of uncreating? Well, it's time we pivot from the narrative itself into a philosophical autopsy of what the source material is actually trying to teach us here.
Let's get into the epilogue, Anatomy of Active Nihilism.
Unpacking the deep concepts embedded in this dark performance is totally crucial to understanding this explainer. The big, overarching philosophy at play here is active nihilism. See, entities like the Grimgrash? They aren't just out there destroying things for the fun of it. They act as metaphysical antibodies. It's like an immune system for the universe. Their job is to fiercely test the authenticity of any new creation. The idea is that our hollow comforts, the cities of habit and the masks of the herd, have to be burned away. Only a genuine triumph of will can survive that void. If your legacy is just a brightly colored scarf, yeah, it's getting harvested. This whole thing brilliantly illustrates the concept of the inverted hero's journey. Think about your typical traditional myths. A hero climbs a mountain, finds some grand enlightenment, and comes back down to save the world, right? Well, the Grim Gnash did the exact opposite. He spent 10 years in the freezing high cold, ascending to the peaks, but he definitely didn't do it to save humanity. He did it to forge a gray truth that was intended specifically to uncreate it. It takes that classic heroic structure we all know and just turns it entirely upside down, turning it into a mechanism of pure negation. And if you want to see the Crimson Knight's metaphysical destruction in actual practice, just look at the fate of Landaria. The Knight's philosophy doesn't just lash out at random targets, it systematically dismantles rigid pillars of control, specifically the scholar, the knight, and the king. By unleashing these agents of rupture, like wit and hunger, the result is basically guaranteed, a total collapse into violence, which ultimately ends in the great silence of the halls of stone. It's a perfect macro example of how the knight operates as the ultimate agent of metaphysical rupture. So, pulling this all together, what are we really looking at? This incredibly dark lore teaches us that human existence is a recurring cycle of hollowing, not redemption.
Our roast beast, all our vanity, all our achievements, is really just a scarf trying to hide the abyss. Progress itself is treated as a total illusion overseen by predatory psychopomp. Ultimately, those milestones we spend our whole lives chasing, they're just stitches in the shroud of the universe. And seekers are never actually guided to a comforting home, but only to desolate, if beautiful, mirages. Which leaves us with one final, pretty haunting thought to close out today's explainer. Since the cycle of the eternal return guarantees that absolutely every new creation will eventually have to face the metaphysical chill of the Crimson Night, you have to ask yourself, is your legacy a genuine triumph of will, or is it really just another hollow feast waiting to be cleared off the stage? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this incredible dark performance, and I'll see you in the next explainer.